Imagine this. You're sitting at home sipping coffee when suddenly there's a loud knock on your door. You open it, and 3 men in fake uniforms barge in, flashing plastic badges and declaring, "We're the HOA Police and you're under arrest." Sounds insane, right? Because there's no such thing as HOA Police. But here's the shocking twist. These men weren't just crazy neighbors playing dress-up. They were running a terrifying scam, dragging innocent families into vans, demanding thousands of dollars in fines, and threatening to make people disappear if they didn't pay. Most victims were too scared to fight back. But this time, they picked the wrong house. Why? Because the man they tried to arrest wasn't just a regular homeowner. He was an undercover FBI agent. And what happened next turned into one of the most jaw-dropping takedowns you'll ever hear. From fake arrests to secret surveillance to a shocking FBI sting operation, this story will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very end. So before we dive into this unbelievable story, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching this video from? The afternoon sun poured lazily across the quiet suburban street where Ethan lived, a neighborhood known for its rows of identical houses and the ever-watchful eyes of the HOA board. Ethan, a man in his mid-30s with a calm demeanor and sharp instincts, had chosen this neighborhood deliberately. To anyone who looked, he was just another homeowner, keeping his lawn trimmed and paying his dues on time. But behind that calm exterior, he carried a secret he could never reveal to his neighbors. He was an undercover FBI agent, his true identity buried beneath layers of routine and normalcy. Most evenings he enjoyed his coffee on the porch, pretending to be one of them, a regular man who waved at dog walkers and complained about trash pickup schedules. But that illusion cracked the day the so-called HOA police showed up at his door, wearing mismatched uniforms and smug grins. They didn't knock politely. They banged, 3 loud thuds that rattled the door like a warrant being served. Ethan frowned, stood up from his chair, and walked over slowly, already sensing something was wrong. When he opened it, 3 men stood there. Their uniforms were cheap imitations, dark blue shirts with badges clearly purchased online, the stitching uneven, the insignia nonsensical. The tallest of the group, a man with thinning blonde hair, stepped forward and declared with unearned authority, "Sir, we are with the HOA Police. You're under arrest for multiple violations against community regulations." Ethan blinked. He had lived undercover long enough to control his expressions, but inside he was already dissecting the situation. There was no such thing as HOA Police. There were HOA boards, committees, letters, fines, even threats of lawsuits, but never an arrest. "Under arrest?" he repeated, his voice calm, almost amused. The shorter man to the left crossed his arms, puffing out his chest as if to add weight to the charade. "Yes," he said. "You've repeatedly ignored citations about your mailbox not matching community color standards, your trash bins being visible, and your fence being 2 inches taller than regulation. You think you can just ignore us?" Ethan studied their faces. These weren't just nosy neighbors. They were opportunists, entitled men who thought fear could get them what they wanted. He stepped aside slightly, keeping his voice polite, playing along. "Why don't you show me your badges a little closer?" The tall blonde man smirked and lifted the fake badge, which looked more like a toy than anything official. "This is all the authority we need. Now, you either come with us quietly, or things will get difficult." Ethan tilted his head. Something about the way they phrased it made him certain this wasn't just some prank. They want power, control, maybe even money. Pretending not to care, he leaned against the doorframe and said, "You know, that's interesting. Because as far as I'm aware, community violations don't carry arrests. They carry fines. And fines come in writing." The tallest man narrowed his eyes, clearly irritated. "Look, buddy, you can either cooperate or deal with the consequences. The HOA board sent us to handle you, and if you resist, you'll regret it." Ethan allowed a smile to tug at his lips, not because he found them amusing, but because he was calculating. These weren't harmless idiots. They were testing boundaries, and if he didn't handle this carefully, they might escalate. "All right," he said softly. "Give me 1 second, let me grab my shoes." He shut the door gently, walked back into the living room, and pulled out his phone. He didn't dial 911. Instead, he accessed a secure line, coded and masked, leading straight back to the bureau. 3 individuals posing as authority. Possible extortion scheme. He whispered quickly. "Need surveillance support." He slid the phone away, changed into sneakers, and took a slow breath. If they wanted a show, he'd give them one. When he opened the door again, the men were waiting impatiently. "About time," the short one muttered. Ethan gestured. "Lead the way, then. Let's see what kind of jail cell the HOA police have." They grinned, satisfied they had scared him. But inside, Ethan was ready, every muscle coiled for what was to come. The men guided him down the street to a black van parked crookedly near the corner. Ethan's trained eye noticed immediately that the plates were fake, the windows tinted poorly, and the back doors scuffed as if they had been forced shut many times. As he approached, neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, whispering to each other. To them, it might have looked real enough, authority figures handling a troublemaker. That was what made this so dangerous. People wanted to believe in authority, even false authority, if it was presented with enough confidence. One of the men yanked the van door open and gestured inside. "Get in." Ethan tilted his head again, pretending hesitation. "And where exactly are we going?" The tallest man sneered. "You'll find out. Don't worry, it won't take long." Inside, Ethan's blood ran colder. These weren't just entitled HOA busybodies playing cop. They were predators using the HOA as a cover story. But what exactly were they after, and how many others had they already tricked? He stepped inside, sitting calmly as the door slammed shut behind him. The van rumbled to life, the smell of old gasoline filling the air. Ethan rested his hands on his knees, relaxed but prepared. He knew his bureau team would already be triangulating his location, but he needed to stretch this out to understand the scope of the operation. The man in the passenger seat twisted around. "You think you're smart, huh? We've seen you. Always acting like the rules don't apply. The board's tired of you. But us, well, we're not just here to enforce the rules. We're here to make sure people like you pay." Ethan gave him a slow nod. "So it's money you're after?" The man smirked. "Money, respect, same thing. You'll give us what we want, or you'll regret it." Ethan's mind worked rapidly. If they thought they had power, they'd push further, which meant more evidence, more leverage for him. He leaned back against the metal wall of the van, hiding his growing determination. They thought he was just another helpless neighbor. But soon, they'd realize the grave mistake they had made. At that exact moment, the van swerved sharply, pulling into an abandoned lot near the edge of town. Crunched on gravel and the engine died. The men ordered Ethan out, circling him with forced bravado. The tallest leaned in close, his breath sour, his voice low. "This is how it works. You'll hand over $10,000, cash, or you'll wish you had listened to us earlier. No checks, no delays. Cash, tomorrow, or else." Ethan stared at him, his face unreadable. Inside, he knew this was bigger than HOA nonsense. It was organized intimidation, and it was his job to unravel it. Ethan stood in the empty lot, the gravel crunching beneath his shoes as the fake HOA enforcers surrounded him like wolves circling prey. The demand for $10,000 echoed in his mind, not because he feared it, but because it told him exactly what he needed to know. These men weren't just neighborhood bullies. They were running an organized extortion ring under the guise of HOA authority, and if they were bold enough to drag him into a van in broad daylight, they had probably already victimized others who were too afraid to fight back. His eyes locked on the tallest man, and though his expression stayed calm, his training sharpened every detail. The way the man's hand twitched near his belt, the nervous sweat rolling down the short one's temple, the anxious tapping of the driver's boot against the ground. These weren't professionals. They were desperate. And desperate men always slipped up. $10,000 tomorrow, Ethan repeated slowly as though committing it to memory. The tallest nodded smugly. "That's right. And if you don't show up with it, we'll make sure you regret it in ways you can't even imagine." Ethan gave the faintest of smiles, one that only his bureau colleagues would recognize, the smile he wore when he knew the trap was about to spring shut. "All right," he said. "You'll get your money. But I'll need proof. Something that shows you're really with the HOA board, otherwise how do I know this isn't just a scam?" The short man scoffed, but the leader quickly interjected. "You don't ask questions. We're the authority here. You just do what you're told." Ethan's phone buzzed faintly in his pocket, a coded vibration only he could interpret. His team was nearby, moving into position, but he needed more. He needed these men to incriminate themselves fully, to reveal how far their operation stretched. He shifted his weight, keeping his voice steady. "If I pay you tomorrow, how do I know you'll stop harassing me? What if you keep coming back?" The leader grinned, baring yellowed teeth. "That's the beauty of it, buddy. We own this neighborhood. Everyone pays eventually. The smart ones pay fast. The dumb ones, well, they disappear." There it was, the slip he'd been waiting for. A confession wrapped in arrogance. Ethan's heartbeat slowed as his plan crystallized. He had to stretch this one more step to see if they'd expose how many others they'd targeted. "And how many neighbors have already paid?" Ethan asked casually. The short one laughed nervously. "Enough to know you'd better not test us." The driver added with a sneer. "Yeah, the Johnsons, the Parkers, they didn't believe us either at first, but now they're real cooperative." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Families. Innocent families terrorized into silence. He knew what he had to do. But before he could act, the leader grabbed his arm roughly. "Tomorrow, 10,000, same spot. Don't be late." They shoved him back toward the van and motioned for him to get in again. Ethan complied without resistance, his mind already orchestrating every move. The ride back was silent, except for the rattle of the old van. When they finally dumped him near his house, Ethan walked calmly up his driveway, watching as the van screeched off. Only when the taillights vanished did he exhale and pull out his phone. "They confessed," he whispered into the secure line. "Extortion confirmed. Multiple families targeted. Plan phase 2. That night, Ethan sat in his dimly lit living room, staring at the neat rows of houses outside. Behind every curtain, a family lived in quiet fear, probably too ashamed or intimidated to speak up. That thought hardened his resolve. He wasn't just exposing criminals, he was restoring dignity to people who had been stripped of it. As dawn broke, the bureau team assembled in an unmarked SUV down the block. Ethan briefed them quickly. "They'll expect me at the lot with cash. We'll let them believe I'm alone. Once they incriminate themselves again, you move in. We 8 need them alive and talking. There might be more behind this." His colleagues nodded. Hours later, Ethan walked toward the abandoned lot once more, a plain duffel bag in hand. Inside wasn't cash but decoy bundles, weighted to look authentic. The same black van rolled up, doors swinging open like a predator's jaw. The men climbed out, their confidence radiating. "You got it?" the leader demanded. Ethan held up the bag calmly. "Right here." The leader snatched it, unzipped it, and rifled through the fake bills with greedy hands. "Good," he said. "Now maybe you'll get to keep that pretty little house of yours." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "And what about the Johnsons and the Parkers? Did they get to keep theirs after paying you?" The leader froze, caught off guard. The short man cursed under his breath. The driver growled. "Why you asking about them? You trying to get smart again?" Ethan's voice turned colder. "I'm just wondering how long you thought this scam would last before someone called you out." The leader sneered. "Long enough. People are sheep. They see a badge, they obey. Simple as that. And you?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You'd better not get any ideas about fighting back or you'll end up like the others." That was the signal. Ethan's earpiece crackled softly. "Now," he whispered. In seconds, the quiet lot exploded into motion. Black SUVs screeched in from every side, doors flying open as agents poured out, weapons trained. "FBI, hands where we can see them." The 3 fake enforcers spun in shock, their arrogance shattering into panic. The leader dropped the bag and raised his hands. The short one stammered in disbelief, and the driver made a desperate dash for the van, only to be tackled by 2 agents before he reached it. Ethan stepped forward, his badge now gleaming in the sunlight as he revealed what he truly was. The men's faces drained of color. "FBI?" the leader whispered, his bravado collapsing. Ethan's voice was steel. "There's no such thing as HOA Police, and your little game is over." The arrests went smoothly. The men cuffed and read their rights as neighbors began to gather at the edges of the lot, whispering in shock. For the first time, the community saw that those who had terrorized them were nothing more than cowards in costume. Later, as agents collected evidence and the van was towed away, Ethan approached the Johnsons and the Parkers, who had been quietly summoned by the Bureau. They looked at him with a mixture of relief and shame. "We thought we were the only ones," Mrs. Johnson admitted softly. Ethan shook his head. "They preyed on that silence. but not anymore. Over the next weeks, the truth unraveled fully. The fake HOA police had been running their scam across multiple neighborhoods, using intimidation and fake authority to squeeze money from innocent families. Thanks to Ethan's undercover patience, the Bureau dismantled the entire network. But the story didn't end there. One evening, as Ethan sat once more on his porch sipping coffee, a group of neighbors approached. Some carried pies, others just nervous smiles. Mr. Parker spoke for all of them. "We owe you more than we can say. You didn't just stop them. You reminded us we don't have to live in fear." Ethan gave a rare, genuine smile. "You don't owe me anything. Just look out for each other. That's the real strength of a community." The crowd nodded, their gratitude clear, and though they never truly knew the depth of who he was or the world he lived in, they felt safer knowing he was among them. As the sun dipped low, Ethan leaned back in his chair, the quiet of the neighborhood returning. His cover was intact, his mission complete, and the entitled men who thought fake authority could bend the world had learned the hard way that true authority stood in the shadows, watching, waiting, and ready.